how much money should you be spending on creative production relative to your ad spend if you're trying to grow your ad account more and you're sort of past the big wins phase?
We have spent so much time recently thinking about the operational system that's related to creative production. I think it is a huge gap in the way that most people work, because every ad is functionally a bet.
That's right.
Okay. Which means it has a cost.
Yep.
And it has an expected value.
Yep.
And the relationship between those two things is wildly important.
For the second time, I am back with a long, wide-ranging episode with Taylor Holiday, cross-posted both here, Colab episode, and in the Ecommerce Playbook podcast feed. Taylor and I got to a wide range of stuff, as we do in these episodes, in person, over a beer, in his office, in Orange County, with all the people gone in the evening. We talked about all kinds of business stuff, like incrementality, spent a lot of time on that, creative budget and creative production, in particular in regards to AI, and had a little bit of debate about sort of quality versus quantity and humans versus robots and some of that kind of stuff. We talked about outsourced labor and the effect that has on growing e-commerce businesses as well. And then we got into a bunch of other stuff too. Talked parenting and kids a little bit. Talked about the idea of mental fitness. You're going to like this. If you have liked the last one of these that we did, you'll like this one too. Let's get into it. Me and Taylor Holiday.
For those of you that are new to this, this is our second random show. This is inspired by Tim Ferris and Kevin Rose, who are two obviously podcasters who would get together and just talk about life. And so this is an excuse for Andrew and I to hang out and catch up because we don't get to as much as we used to for a myriad of reasons. But so we're selfishly using this as a chance to catch up and then entertain you all with a bunch of random topics that aren't directly related to creative testing and cost control.
No creative testing and cost controls on this episode.
I mean, maybe we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we'll do, like last time, right, some business. We got a few topics lined up for top of mind business stuff. This is like, you and I just do this all the time. Like Marco Polo, here's the thing I've been thinking about, send you a video. And this is a good idea by you. Just like, hey, let's just sit and do this for a little while. So
so we keep a Google Doc kind of running in between episodes of just stuff we come across that we think will be fun to discuss with each other. And
maybe a little bit of parenting, maybe a little bit
parenting,
of training.
Exactly, a little training. Always some baseball usually gets woven in there. And hopefully you enjoy it.
People look at our two bodies and say, how do we get those bodies? Tell us what you
we'll
do.
Give you some fitness inspiration. So we're
drinking beer.
Yeah, exactly.
What is this that you gave me? It just says beer on it.
So we share an office with one of our clients, Skull Candy, which is cool because people like the office and we use it for entertainment and other things. And there's always stuff in the fridge. And so we have a couple brands that come by and use the studio to shoot production. And this is one of them. It's art by Meryl Smith at Meryl Smith Studio on Instagram. And it says open beer. And that's it. That's all I know. But it's cool.
Beer. Cool. It's good.
Yeah. Fort Collins Brewing, New Belgium. I don't know.
Oh, that's funny. So it's like a New Belgium white label because New Belgium is that's a big brewery. That's a Fat Tire.
Oh, okay.
That's that brewery. So
that makes sense.
It's from them.
There you
That's
go.
Cool. Collaboration with New Belgium. Okay. Openbrewing.com. Interesting. Cool. Well, it's good. Thanks for the beer.
So to kick things off, I think I'm going to ask you this every time because we sort of have an underlying bet, or at least I have a bet with myself about the inevitability.
Do you want to find some way to get yourself some upside in this bet?
I think you're going to lose so many bets to me, like you already have about your long form explainer for Bamboo Earth that you didn't make. And for those of you who tuned in the last episode,
I told you I wasn't going to make it. I have clients.
Dave, can you please get with him and make him make you this ad?
I will. I should do it. But it would be. What do you? The problem with doing this with you is that even if I do it, you will not
poke holes.
You will be like, oh, that's not the reason it worked. It's not because of the thing you said would work. Yeah.
But that's good because if you just don't do it, you can keep saying that. Which is good.
Yeah, everybody wins.
So my question is,
what is the thing that you never do with you won't do with me? Typing test. You've been telling me you can beat me in a typing test for years. I'm so much faster. As I've told you before, I think it's possible that typing speed is actually the thing I'm best at in life.
I think you're aging though rapidly. You have small children right now. Your
error rate going up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So my question is, are you building an agency yet? Or what's going on with AJF Growth?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you an influencer?
Okay.
Who are you?
So good question. The short answer is no. And here's the definitive way to answer the question. I have no more clients in terms of total clients since we last talked about this.
Okay. Do you have employees?
Yes, the same numbers I had before.
Okay.
So I do have
two, three?
2 in the US. Actually, I do have 1 more in the Philippines. So maybe a little step towards it.
Okay.
I have an additional
so you grew by
1 or
30%.
2 people.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. No, because I had before 4 in the Philippines. Now I have 6 in the Philippines.
Okay, so you have
Yeah.
6
It's
in the
basically
Philippines, 2
I
in the
added a
US?
designer to be able to support my current client load better as they
Okay.
grow. And then I have I added somebody to take over ad builds. So
Okay,
basically like the very very sort of junior media buyer kind of
How
role.
long ago did we record?
A couple months.
So
I don't remember. How long
every
ago?
2 months you grow 40% in size. I think we've got a real compounding agency. That's
Yeah, it could be.
You might be 100 people in 2 years.
please don't let that
This
be
is where
true.
you're headed.
No. I don't think so. And I've actively said no to clients on account of not wanting to staff them with other people, etc. So I still do the client work.
Okay.
There's some slight tweaks to that. So I think one thing you're right about with this is that talented people need to grow, and like I added people who are talented. So creating opportunity for them is important. But let's take this. So there's that. Let's take this back though a step, which I think is actually maybe a more interesting question for a lot of people. I remember hearing somebody say recently, maybe you'll know what the provenance of this is. I don't remember, but somebody was saying, I think on Twitter, that basically like the opportunity you decide to pursue has like this massive impact on the potential outcome, right? Like essentially, like let's say I'm going to work 40 hours a week every week, okay, which is about what I work. I don't tend to work a lot more hours than that, notwithstanding a week where I come down here at night sometime.
Sure.
I can apply the leverage of that 40 hours to any number of problems.
That's right.
And so the person was saying, what everybody underestimates, that your wedding ring? What everybody underestimates is how important it is to pick the right thing to work on, right?
Yep.
This is sort of an obvious point. And yet what he says is that this point is obvious to everybody, and yet almost nobody thinks that hard about. They don't take the time to really think seriously. Exactly. Yeah. And I would say that's been a lot of my own career. And so I am at a spot now where, like I said, there's an additional demand for my services. And I have this decision to make, which is like, is that the best use of my time next? And what I am currently deciding is that it is not, for a couple of reasons. So this guy was saying before he quit a job or something like that, and he took 3 months researching opportunities, trying to think through these from every angle. He basically tried to apply serious critical thinking to the selection of what problem he wanted to solve. And, you could take this on a very large scale, right? Like you could try to solve world hunger, or something like that at 40 hours a week and all that. And so there's this question for me career-wise, which is like, okay, if I'm going to put in that much time, what is the actual highest leverage opportunity? So even aside from anything we talked about last time about like, is this about making the most money or whatever else, like however you define that, what should I actually do with my time? And is building an agency the thing that I want to do? The answer for me right now to that question, well, let me pause. Do you have any thoughts about that idea of problem selection?
Sure. I just don't think that's actually has anything to do with the framework that you're using to make decisions.
What do you mean?
Like, I don't think you're looking at your time and going, what's the biggest leverage opportunity, and trying to find it and allocate towards it.
You don't think I'm doing that right now?
No, not at all. Well, because you just said you could choose world hunger, you could choose whatever. So nor are you trying to choose the thing that you think could make you $1 billion. So I don't think it's about the highest leverage activity. I see you as operating. You have a fairly low ambition monetarily.
Definitely.
And you're sort of satisfied.
Yeah.
And so I think you're playing.
Yeah.
Like even the thing that you just told me about, which I don't think we're talking about yet on camera, maybe we will in a couple months.
Yeah.
That is like insane to me.
Yeah.
It's totally playing.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like an actual attempt to apply the principle you just described.
So, well, it is if you, well, we can't talk about that yet.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Maybe I'll roll that out someday on the random show.
Yeah.
So I think you're right about that. And I think I'm also I think you can apply that advice imperfectly and still apply it better than if you don't think about it. Right? Like essentially, like if you apply the pick your problem advice within a smaller framework, even it's still helpful. Which is like and I mean, I guess everybody is trying to do this all the time, right? Like what's the next best place to put my dollars or something like that, right? Is a question about ROI and some of that. So I'll go back to the original question. I think the most interesting opportunity for me right now, and I'll tell you how I got there, is continued content output, and to do that across podcast and maybe newsletter and sort of audience growth around those things. And there's a positive and a negative reason for that. The negative reason is I do think I'm a bad process builder. And even aside from that potentially self-limiting belief, I don't like it at all. I take no joy in doing it. And so it just feels like work I absolutely have no pleasure in. It's a bit like running as part of my workout routine. Like I would like to be able to run. I think you can't really be fit if you can't run. I don't like to go for a run. You know, there's people who like just adore, they run or tie, all that stuff. My wife's like that. Like, and I have no pleasure in it, but I'll do it because I need to, but I don't want to run all the time. I'm just not going to run a marathon anytime soon because it's just too much running for me. Yeah. And that's how I feel about building processes. And actually, you're a big example of this, which is like what I've watched happen at CTC is that the more you've committed to build incredible process all the way down through your entire team, the service has become incredible. And frankly, that's actually part of the reason I don't want to build an agency is because I don't want to compete with you. And what I mean is I just feel like I don't think I could make my service good enough to where I wouldn't be able to look somebody in the eye and be like, you should choose me over CTC. You know, like I think right now, I think for my particular kind of client that I can make that case credibly, but I just don't think I can. I just think your thing is too good. It's too good.
You would fail a bunch of times on the way. I think you'd have to get more okay with saying it and being wrong.
I
think one of the biggest things I think it's actually one of the reasons I think a lot of agency owners stay small is they have this language that they use about how important the quality of service to them is, but it's really just this sort of like trap that you fall into, which is that you get hung up on this idea that ever failing at the promise would be somehow so unallowable to you. But in reality, you fail all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's just,
sure.
Your intention really matters in that process.
Yeah. I think you are retconning history so bad on your own story with this right now. Retconning, retroactive continuity.
It's retroactive. Can we add that to the discussion later?
No, I think no. It's when like TV shows or movies. I think the way to do it is like
you think I was hung up on quality.
No. I think what you're retconning is how much it hurt right now.
I mean, doubt. I'm not. Did I say it wouldn't? I don't think.
I just think what you realized in the process of trying to scale CTC fast, in the way that you did, and I get pissed off when I hear people say that, like, "Oh, CTC only cares about money," or it's like, that's
insanity.
Right. Like it's like no, it's hard. It's not that it's not that, but like what I think is that you are underplaying right now, like how much it hurt you personally when you realized your name was being associated with a quality of service that was bad. So my point is like, you actually sat here on the podcast last time and said, I wouldn't go back and do that again.
Well, there's a lot.
So there's levels of failure that you are and are not willing to go and do.
For sure. But I don't think that we're talking about the level of the pain that I was describing last time being singularly associated with the failure of expert clients and the perception of me in that. I think it was much broader than that. The consequence of having to lay off so many people, there was so much more than that. I don't think that you should be afraid to grow your business under the pretense that you may say to someone, I'm going to do my best to deliver this service for you, and you may fail in some way to do that. Because I think you do that anyways.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I just don't think I could do a good job right now training people to deliver service at a quality that I would feel good about.
What if you didn't have to train them? What if they were actually additive to the quality all on their own? What if you found people smarter than you to partner with?
I still wouldn't have good process. I would still just be like hiring.
What if they were good at process?
Yeah. So that would actually be the way I would do it if I was going to do it. I would have to find somebody who I could install on day one as essentially a COO, and from an early stage who saw vision for it, split the equity, whatever, that would be the way I would do it if I was going to do it. I don't really want to do that right now. I also like the control of owning 100% of my business and all that stuff. So here's the other side of that. Okay. To not get hung up on too long, is that I think one of my best skills is teaching and explaining things.
That's what its service business is.
Well, and so I think that there's a way to leverage that with with content output. And yeah,
I think you should absolutely keep doing the content. And I think the greatest leverage application for it would be a service. What is a better leverage application for building the audience? What's the audience for?
For the content.
But to monetize in what way? Like what's the end result?
Advertising partners and that sort of thing. People make a lot of money with newsletters and podcasts and stuff.
I don't know how many people in our space make more money than I do doing that.
Yeah.
So I know,
but
that pales in comparison to the money we make in services.
Yeah, but your thing is so. Yeah, but how much money you could make from content is enough for me.
That I think is the question.
And also I think there's a way in which there's the potential frustrations of a service business maybe would be different in a content business. There would still be frustrations. I know enough to know now that everything looks greener on the other side.
We'll just stop here. We'll just check back in.
Okay, great.
Check back in next time as you continue to grow your business and continue to label it so what do we call it now though?
I call it an agency. I call it a boutique agency.
Okay.
I mean, it's definitely an agency. It's just that it's a boutique agency.
We've crossed the line from consultant, individual freelancer.
Well,
to agency.
As soon as I hired people, I was willing to call it an agency.
So we've moved to boutique agency.
Yeah.
So maybe my next episode will be that.
Maybe
okay.
So.
Got it.
Maybe so. Yeah. What I mean, when you think about, well, we should move on because we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about. So,
but the thing I'll put in the sand is like this thing that you're doing. I unless it's like purely relational, is insane relative to the opportunity that you have in front of you.
What do you mean? What's the opportunity in front of me
for AJF growth?
You think it could be a bigger, better agency?
And
or like an agency
maybe
with
we
more
do this.
financial. Yeah, right. Many, if not most, Meta advertisers at this point are using a third-party pixel to get upgraded tracking from their website back to Meta so that your site will send the maximum amount of data back to Meta, which will help optimize performance and also give you the most accurate reporting in your Meta ads dashboard. The tool I use for that, for my brands, is called BILY, BILY.ai, BILY. BILY is an awesome tool. It's actually a one-stop shop replacement for Google Tag Manager. Like, click of a button, you can use it for your Meta pixel, you can use it for your TikTok, Snapchat ads, if you're running those, Twitter ads, Google ads with enhanced conversions, GA4 one-click setup. Like, that's amazing. GA4 is a mess for me to set up for brands before this. It's a really cool tool, and it works great. It's also really competitively priced. I don't know anybody else like it. So if you're looking for a 100% server-side tracking tool using Conversions API to track your Meta ads, that's the number one value prop for me and for most of my listeners. It goes beyond that as well. Go check out BILY.ai, BILY.ai. Probably for a lot of you, you will need to generate like 2 extra conversions per month for it to pay off. And you can actually get started and even test it. Like, literally just run it side by side against your current pixel. You can test it for $1 for the first month. So it's a very low commitment to get it onto your site. Go check it out, BILY.ai, to get 100% server-side tracking with BILY today. I've been thinking about this thing specifically for brands that reach a particular leverage point. Because let's say you're sub $5 million.
Yep.
How much money should you spend on content relative to your ad spend? Okay.
Yep.
And my answer to that question is basically as little as possible.
Okay.
Like, kind of simply, right? Like, you can up until 5 loosely, right? So maybe it's 7, maybe it's 3, I don't know, whatever. But somewhere in that range, mid 7 figures, you can have giant like steps forward in your ad account by like saying the value proposition better. You know what I mean? Like, essentially, like, big creative wins happen at that level of business, to where you go from spending 50 grand a month to 150 grand a month off of 2 ads that got better, right?
Yep.
You have those moments. Those moments slow down over time, though.
Yes.
Right? You stop producing those kinds of step function growth in your spend, on the one hand. On the other hand, e-commerce, I've actually been thinking about this recently. You can comment on this if you want, but I think somewhere around 3 to 4 million is one of the hardest phases of e-commerce, because your business is big enough now to demand a lot from you, but you still have not reached true e-commerce economy of scale. Like, it's really, I mean, they're probably all the phases of business are hard, but it's just a very hard phase of business, I think. Okay. But I think there's another phase for a lot of brands, at least, where they get to 10 plus million and they actually start to create more economy of scale in their business, particularly if they're disciplined about their OpEx. If they're disciplined about their OpEx, that's where you can begin to get to sub 10% OpEx pretty consistently And if you have, let's say you've got a good margin, 65, 70 points of margin. If you've got a little bit of LTV in the business, your ad spend can become, 25, 30% of your P&L, whatever it is. And suddenly you can be running a business with like 20% bottom line, depending on how fast you're trying to grow, all those kinds of things. So now you may actually at that phase of business have some money to throw around and think about taking larger bets. This is something you've been talking about a lot recently, which I've really loved your conversations about this recently, actually. Like the idea of like, think seriously for these brands about big product innovation, giant drops, big marketing moments. It's hard to do that when you're sub 10 million, right? I think. Maybe you disagree with that, but I think it's really, really hard to take too big of a swing there. So, okay, put all that together. There's this question for me that's interesting, really tactical. How much money should you be spending on creative production relative to your ad spend if you're trying to grow your ad account more? And you're sort of past the big wins phase.
Yeah.
Okay. So disagree with any of that part of the premise that you want, but that's what I've been thinking about.
So we have spent so much time recently thinking about the operational system that's related to creative production. I think it is a huge gap in the way that most people work, because every ad is functionally a bet.
That's right.
Okay. Which means it has a cost.
Yep.
And it has an expected value.
Yep.
And the relationship between those two things is wildly important. So the question of how much you should spend is relative to the value that each unit you produce creates. So, and I mean that in marginal value. So I'm looking at right now, we track, people may have seen my Outlier ad series where we look at the spend that we can produce per ad. We'll look at this contribution margin per ad. It depends on, this is a brand where contribution margin per ad, the one I'm looking at, doesn't make sense because we drive to break even on first order. So it's like, it doesn't follow that. Like, so we think about it in spend. So if every ad produces, let's just use some easy math, $100 in spend, which we would say, is a measure for value. Okay. And let's just, for simple math, say that creates $100 in revenue, whatever. Then there's the question of, okay, what is the cost to produce that unit? And brands that can drive down the cost of production of that unit have massive leverage over other businesses in the same way you have low OPEX or great margin. Creative scale and production at low cost is a massive leverage point.
Yes.
So this is why AI, I think, is such an important part of this conversation, because it's the biggest factor, I think, in potentially driving down the cost per unit of production. So the answer to the question has to do with how efficient you are. So how much margin you have to spend per ad relative to its performance, and the value of each unit that you produce. But that relationship between the cost of each unit of production and the value of each unit of production is something you should track and continue to try and improve.
Do you think there's any heuristic you'd give somebody there?
In terms of spend 10% of your media?
Yep.
Let's assume that most brands set their ROAS target and drive their overall business to their absolute marginal threshold.
Okay.
I bet that most people don't include creative in that calculation.
Correct.
And so what I would say is that you are going to likely have to begin to include some cost associated with production in order to get to that idea, which is going to alter your ROAS target and to see if you can get there. So I think it probably determines.
So you essentially think that the creative production ought to go under the advertising and marketing portion of your P&L?
I don't think so, because it doesn't move in the same linear fashion. Like it is chunkier as a fixed cost.
Yes. Yeah.
But the relationship ahead, like, so when I think about planning a month, I think about how much spend I'm trying to get to, how many units of production that's required. And it's different every month because I'm bringing with me a different amount of spend each month from my previous month.
Yeah.
But that relationship between the incremental amount of spend and that cost of production has to have some relationship. Yeah. It's one of the main reasons why I don't think that creative should be an internal resource. Creative has to be a variable cost in your business, in the sense that you have to scale it up and down relative to necessity. Yeah. It's one of the biggest mistakes I think people make on OpEx is having in-house creative. Yeah. In-house creative makes almost no sense in an e-commerce business.
Yeah. Okay. So do you assign the expected value of an ad, of a unit, ad unit, right? Yep. We'll call it, right? Do you assign that expected value differently relative to some assessment of the quality of the ad? What I mean is,
So I think every brand should define a baseline standard that in order for an ad to be considered an ad, it has to achieve the standard. So you don't even get to be an ad unless you've achieved the quality. So if I have to make 100 ads, you, the brand owner, define the gate through which I have to enter into in order to become an ad.
This is your argument against the Post-it note, for example, right? It's just too low of quality.
For me, if I was running a brand, well, there are some brands for whom I think the Post-it note makes sense. I think and I love Hexclad.
Right.
It grieves my soul to see them run Post-it note ads.
Yeah.
If I was in charge of the brand, and I have tons of respect, it's probably crushing whatever, maybe I'm wrong on this, but from a pure brand ethos, and this is very subjective, I think that there are a lot of brands for whom that shouldn't meet the threshold.
Yeah. Okay. So do you assess the potential value of let's go extreme here, a 10-minute long ad video, long explainer, problem, agitation, solution, VSL, that kind of thing, right? Do you assess the potential value of that ad versus a well-designed still image differently?
No, this is the problem, is that I actually don't think there's any predictive value that the long form has any higher upside.
Well, so long form is a fraught term now in these conversations because I've used it in a specific way, but I forget that particular thing. What I'm saying is essentially an ad that is a higher amount of investment. Is there, or is the entire game for you keep the investment as low as possible, because as long as you meet the threshold that you talked about, as long as they get through the gate, keep the investment as low as possible and take as many bets as possible, because it's so impossible to break the outcome.
If I was a small brand, I would run almost no video, because it's just a bet game. It's an expected value calculation. That the cost to produce quality static image ads is basically $0. So you can make so many of them, and I just don't see any proof that any ad type has a higher expected value than any other ad type.
Well, stills are almost always retargeting. Taylor, you didn't know that?
Yeah, right. Tell the people you're kidding so they don't get it.
I'm kidding. Okay, I'm kidding. I hear that sometimes, and I think probably in some account somewhere. That's interesting. I think it's probably still wrong. I still think you're too negative about the ability of different ads to produce different outcomes. I don't think it's about format, by the way. I do think you can do a great still image.
Cost the most important variable?
Because I think it just depends on the brand some in terms of what actually communicates their value proposition best. I think there are brands where it's the Kayla silicone ring ad, black and white, that product doesn't need a lot of explanation. The still image does a great job communicating what the value proposition is. And so you don't really need to I could do a long form explainer for that ad, but it's a piece of rubber on your wrist, whatever. So I don't know, maybe it would work better, but I'm not sure. What I'm thinking about partly here is that agrees with you is this is like an Alex Hormozy principle here, where he talks about, I think it's in Gym Launch Secrets, he talks about, when you're making your ads with this kind of thing, he's like, here's your headline, here's your body copy, here's your da-da-da. Now move them around on the ad as many different ways as you possibly can, and then just launch all of them, because it's so cheap once you've made the first ad to make a million more. And there is a principle there that I do agree with, which is this is part of the, here you go, creative testing conversation, is that instead of iterating off of winners, instead do the testing at the ad creation level, create 10 versions of the ad, because
you actually drive the cost up when you do that too.
Yeah.
The funny thing about iterations is that the highest cost in the creative production process is the human spending the time thinking about it. And it actually, it often destroys the cost benefit in really wild ways. But
okay, so let's take the AI example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So do you think that you should go and get on Claude right now, that somebody watching or listening to this, right, should go and get on Claude right now and get it to spin out a million variations of something, and then get on another AI tool and just go make all of those? Yeah.
And upload them in the ad account.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be brands that do this, that obliterate people at a scale that is hard to imagine, which is they are going to remove all of the legacy human gunk around what has to be true. How many people have to approve an idea?
Yeah.
And they're just going to go, if you go into, I play with this sometimes, where I just go Bamboo Earth, make a flat lay of cactus and let's just say I made 500 of them and put them all in the ad account tomorrow. What I know about Bamboo Earth's performance is that there's nothing precious about the way that anything is happening in a way that we should really hold an insane gate to that idea. But the cost of production is actually still really high.
Yeah.
Now, the alternative to this is a different path, which is marketing storytelling, which is, you want to talk about making video production. I actually say, okay, have something substantive to say.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the cost of production is almost entirely wasted.
So I think in some ways, tell me how this does not disagree with all of the content you've been putting out recently about this point, which is like you have said, like, don't test background colors and things like that, right? Like,
So to be clear, when you say test, testing to me infers the idea that you're attempting to create a learning.
No. I'm using a term way looser than that. I mean, so
I'm all for make 100 ads.
Yeah.
Of random
Okay. Great.
assortments.
Great. That's fine.
Right?
So, but you've also been a big believer in like push really hard on better marketing moments.
Yes.
But what you think is that doesn't really happen at the ad level.
No.
The ad is just the last step in communicating that. That's right. Basically. That's right. It all happens before the ad.
That's right. I think
so okay, let me say something about this. I think that you're probably wrong about the quality versus quantity thing. I'm watching this really closely with a couple different clients right now, and a couple people who are really good.
Well, I'm still okay with a quality gate.
Yeah, well,
I'm okay with that. You can define that. I'm anti ugly ad.
Yeah,
I actually don't think that these things are that the idea that to get quantity you have to degrade quality. I think this is a made up idea.
So yeah, I think that might be wrong, but I'll actually withhold that criticism here. I think it's probably wrong. That's where that's where I'm at right now.
Like if you think about producing a Tesla, right? Nobody says that in order to make more Teslas, you have to make the Teslas worse. What you solve for is you build an assembly line to uphold a standard of quality. And great innovative people build better assembly lines to produce large scale amounts of high quality things.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
You don't have to always trade those things off.
Yeah. Okay. I see that point. That's fine. I'll give you that point for now. Because the actual thing I think is more interesting in this conversation in some ways is the notion that the mistake people are making is actually in some ways just like throw more ads at it. And that what this thing that you've been pushing on recently, I've been thinking about it a lot. It's been a really helpful thought to me, which is like, go make your brand more reach deeper into a person's emotions, essentially, right?
So think of it as, yes.
Like your Born Primitive example, right? Where it's like D-Day shoes with this whole thing. It's such a good example. And here's the thing. Like especially for some brands, like there's a thing where you think about how your brand meets a customer's life in a real way, and they have this emotional connection to it. And what operators ought to think about is like, okay, if you're selling that more than like the cloth of the clothes or whatever, right? You're selling the way your brand connects to this person's values and emotions and stuff like that. How do I, as a brand, go get deeper into that place?
Yep. And
what do I do to do that? And I think that question is worthy of much more reflection for much more brand owners, so much that I don't care to argue with you about this point, because I think even if you're wrong, if people actually focused all their attention on the thing you're saying, it would really help brands.
I just think that you should really broaden the spectrum, or like move into poles here, which is that if it's just an attempt for pure ad performance, that all of the thinking about how we're going to make a better thing here is really minimally impactful. Like this ad format versus that ad format, this font versus this, like this is where all the energy and waste happens. And the variation in outcome is so small between the things, it's unpredictable and nobody actually knows it. Now,
completely agree. If you're framing it on formats and things like that, I completely agree. I think this is all about messaging.
Yeah.
And it's about communicating ideas. That's what I think.
Yeah. And there are probably people who are good at that, but the vast majority of people are the same at it.
I agree with that too.
Like if you pulled all the creative strategists off of Twitter and you gave them Bamboo Earth, like they would produce roughly the same outcome.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
And so the alternative is let them all do whatever they want and do it as cheap as possible and hold them to massive creative cost constraints. And then on the other side, go build an amazing story about an amazing new product with an amazing thing and spend all of your energy and money on that, but don't spend it trying to come up with a bunch of different versions, like time and energy and video cuts of cactus exploding or something.
Yeah. I think this is where some of the iteration stuff conversation goes really wrong, which is like, and where I think brands need to get better, which is like, it is about, when I analyze creative for brands right now, what I try to do is I actually don't break down ads into their component parts. I think instead about like, how is this brand communicating its ideas and which of those ads seem to be resonating with people. And I just make a hypothesis. It's not very scientific, but I just go like, using the instincts I can, looking at the ads that I'm looking at, what ads are resonating with people. And my assumption is that is primarily not about still versus video or anything like that, or about length, or about camera quality, or about any of the things that people want to put that on.
Yep.
What I instead think it is about how good of a job do you do actually communicating the messaging of your brand relative to the customer's life. That's it.
I just think that like the percentage of ads that I see anybody like, could you give me an example maybe of what you're talking about? Like, because if we took everybody's favorite creative strategists on Twitter and just said like, could you just show me, like, I'm pulling up Foreplay right here, just like as a way to look at a bunch of ads. Like,
I'll give you one. I'll give you an example right now. I think we may be able to show this ad later too, right? I'm working with a fruit farm in San Diego.
Okay.
And what I have come to learn is that there's a subset of customers who love farmers market quality fruit. They think of farmers market quality fruit as being better than grocery store fruit.
Yeah.
It probably mostly is, actually, for all kinds of reasons. And they like the taste of it. And so you can show fruit and say this fruit is good, eat it. But the actual messaging that has to matter, and there's a million formats that you could use for this.
Yeah.
But the messaging that matters the most is to explain to people as clearly as possible and as compellingly as possible, this fruit was grown on a farm, and it is better than the fruit that you get from the grocery store. That is the idea somewhere in the brand. That's why actually the brand exists, right? They created a farm in the US to deliver that to people. There's people who like the taste of really good fruit. And so there's probably some layer deeper where that gets into their emotional life or whatever. That's not the most story driven version of it. If you wanted to, you could go into farms as a story and some of those kinds of things. But what I am saying is like, the thing that will make ads work for that brand is being, at least for that particular subset of customers, there's probably some other things too. There's like a gift customer and some of that kind of stuff, right? But like, is to be able to communicate that in as clear and as compelling as way as possible.
So, but let me ask you something in terms of how to do that.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Good Hill Farms.
Good. Like if we took the about page for Good Hill Farms, because like I like this point that you made, that like the brand exists for a specific reason and has a specific story.
Yes.
And we fed it to ChatGPT and we gave it the prompt that you just described, which is write with immense clarity and specificity, write 400 headlines that communicate about the unique value proposition of Good Hill Farms. Do you think you're going to outright that? And who, like, amidst the 400, do you not think that there's clarity somewhere in a way that could then be automatically translated into headline copy, image on ad, take all these images, put them onto things, and like, how is that not the inevitable end conclusion, even if all you introduce to the AI is the principle?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that principle requires some arriving at.
Right, but you've got it. So
yeah, but I think that's actually the hard work. I think the hard work, I mean, in this case, it's maybe not, but I think it's hard. I think there's more hard work in seeing what it is that people care about your product than a lot of people let on. And this is actually where I see a lot of AI-driven ads go bad so far, in my experience, is that they don't actually connect to the thing that people care about. So they do a really good job describing the product, but they don't actually, and particularly at the hook level. And I want to preface this, like, this is a really active area of exploration for me right now.
Yeah.
I'm not telling anybody don't use AI. The opposite. I'm playing with it with some clients. I have one client who's very AI forward. He's awesome at it. He is doing the thing you're doing, and he's writing these long form emails related to the value of his product that like smash for him, and he's doing it in Claude in 3 seconds, and it's incredible. So I'm probably gonna do an interview with him at some point. But the thing I haven't seen AI do yet, and I actually was gonna have a topic today. The topic was going to be I'm sleeping on AI, which is like me personally. Like I'm realizing that I'm probably slow to it. But is that like I haven't seen it like analyze. I haven't seen it arrive at the true value proposition and front load that into a hook that's actually compelling and works yet. I haven't seen it. I bet it will happen, but I haven't seen it yet be able to generate those hooks. Now, if you could do 400, I think you're using ChatGPT right now. I think ChatGPT is a lot worse than Claude too, by the way. So I think Claude does a better job, but as a writer. But I think that like the hooks that so far I have seen from AI-driven ads don't do a very good job of capturing people's attention.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Maybe if you could spin the 50, you just made 50.
I just don't think that there's any math that validates that experience. And I
Yeah.
just, I don't, I don't think that if you took a human and you had them write 50 headlines, that they would outperform the 50 headlines here on a consistent, repeatable basis.
Yeah.
I think you'd get probably random results, but the cost of this is zero and the cost of you is high.
Yeah.
And so the problem
Well,
is,
the human would write 5 to 10,
well,
right? They
like
wouldn't
the
write
amount of
50.
the cost for me to get a human to replicate what I just did, which is I copied the about page into,
Right.
is so, it's so incomparable.
Yes. Right.
That you cannot possibly outperform it at the scale of your cost.
Yeah.
So even if you're cheap, like, but the problem is creative strategists aren't cheap.
They're not cheap.
They're actually wildly expensive to the tune of like $100 an hour.
Do you? Sorry, go ahead.
Like imagine that cost, right? If they could, however many headlines they could write in $100 of hour of cost, I could probably 5,000x their production, maybe infinitely outproduce their production.
Right.
So
can you actually get those into the ad account and all that for the same cost? Like, can you this is what I was going to ask.
Actually,
can you
way faster? Because again, the creative strategist doesn't even get them into the ad account. They get turned into a spreadsheet that a media buyer then goes and uploads. That entire process can be completely absolved.
That's yeah. But there is some point at which the cost of turning 50 headlines into ads does add up versus turning 5 headlines into ads. Like theoretically, if somebody could write 5 better ones, then let's say of this 50, 5 of them work, right? Like you have to then go create the 50 ads. And
who does? What do you mean?
Well, like at some point, those headlines that you're writing have to make it onto still images or whatever, like
that all happens automatically.
Yeah. So that's part of my question. And then I'll just, somebody has to like go add them to the ad account and build the ads.
That can all happen automatically. You can API upload directly into Meta.
Yeah,
I
guess that's true. Yeah.
So that's what's the thing about this, and really Meta's building the AI.
So this is the stuff, right? Right. This is what's actually going to happen. It's all going to move into ads.
Saying all you're going in his latest earnings call is saying all you're going to do is give me your business.
Yeah.
That's the only thing the human at the end of the day is going to actually be responsible for. Now you're going to have probably some sort of creative constraints here, but again, for the sake of this kind of creative work, you have no chance. There's no chance to outperform this mechanism. Now, again, the bigger story about what ChatGPT doesn't control is what Good Hill Farms plants on their farm.
That's right.
What products they make, whether they're actually good or not.
Right.
Who is this person and why do I care about her? I'm looking at one of the founders or something. What do they do with their money? Do they care for people? Do they go reinvest in other local farms? Do they actually build inherent in their story something that matters?
This point, I think, is the point you've been hammering recently in a lot of these conversations that I think is extremely helpful and different than what a lot of people are saying about this. And I think I just would just double down on that. I think there is a thing where you have to think more deeply about that connection point between your actual brand and your customer, and that is actually really hard for AI to do, right? Like to be that creative and unique and thoughtful about these really deep connections,
Well, and they're just not going to. That's not going to proactively do it for you. It may be able to suggest to you ideas about what you could do.
Totally.
But again, to decide what you plant at your farm at this point, it's not going to do that.
Okay, let me ask you another question.
Yep.
You have been tweeting recently.
Yep.
About something, and I've noticed that you've been tweeting about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how your brain works. And so what I have noticed about this thing is that there is a reason you're tweeting about it, and that you have seen something somewhere that is making you interested in it. And that is a discussion point that actually not that long ago, in some ways, I would have assumed you would have rejected.
Yeah.
And that is the conversation around incrementality.
Yes.
So I just want to ask you about that. Why are you interested in this right now? First of all, let me ask, what compelled you to do this? What data did you see somewhere that made you go, I need to tell the world about incrementality and how they're all wasting their money?
A few things. One is there's a massive market demand for it. Everybody wants it.
Yep.
So that's just like a market tactic thing that candidly, it was like, we're going to play in this space. Everybody's demanding it. We're going to come up with a solution for it. Two, almost every incrementality result reinforces our position. And so it gives my methodology more leverage.
What is that?
I
know what it is.
Meta is the most powerful incremental channel, that PMAX is really destructive in a lot of ways, that branded search is limiting, that view conversions are challenging, like all of the things that are in terms of where we move people.
These are all things that I have agreed with you about for a long time.
And so incrementality studies, which Google in their Geo2X, which is their incrementality, conversion lift study that they run, has this whole thing where I think we should put in the show notes the actual research paper that Google has published about geo-matching holdout and their methodology. I think it's a good read for anybody who's interested in this topic. But they call it the gold standard of experiments. You'll hear this language a lot, which is that this is the most scientific way to evaluate causal impact of advertising. And so in that sense, like, I think that we should try to always hold the highest standard to obligating ourselves to making sure that our ads are actually causing incremental impact for the business. Like, we want that. We all want that, I think. And this is the best standard for upholding that. So that's like the next thing. The other thing I would say is that it kills attribution softwares, because what I watch in business is that it's the third data point that destroys everything. What is the third data point? If data point 1 is your business, the actual revenue on your site, let's call it new customer revenue for the sake of, that's like the core metric.
Yep.
The second metric is the in-platform number.
Yep.
It's the third number, the MTA number, that causes this triangulation, that causes immense confusion.
Yep.
And what incrementality does is it builds a relational bridge between the platform reported number and the number, so that I can use the platform data and set my cost controls accordingly.
Doesn't attribution do the same thing? Build a bridge between the two?
No.
Why not?
Because it does not give me a relationship between new customer revenue and the platform reported number. It gives me a third number.
So maybe I've heard you talk about this before, but maybe re-explain the difference between attribution and incrementality.
Attribution is an attempt to assign value to a stage of the funnel, or to different ad platforms based on, well, let me take a step back. Attribution is just simply a method for assigning value to advertising channels or advertising efforts. There are a million types of attribution models. I was starting to slip into MTA, multi-touch attribution, where you're attempting to assign partial value to multiple touch points across the spectrum. Incrementality, or what attribution doesn't attempt to do, is to ask the question of, would there have been the impact had the ads not existed at all? So it's not an attempt at understanding the causal relationship. It's closer to a corollary relationship. It's saying these ads occurred, and there was clearly an interaction. There was a click, there was a view, there was some action across the spectrum, but it doesn't isolate or specifically create a holdout to answer the question of what would have occurred had the ads not existed at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So, so let's say, so maybe frame up an example for people for incrementality. So if there's, let's say I have a 2-to-1 ROAS in Facebook ads dashboard,
yes.
Right? What would an incrementality number be that would,
right.
And what would it tell me?
That's right. So it's going to give you the actual incremental revenue in comparison to the total reported revenue.
Right. So if I spent $100,000, then the total reported revenue is $200,000. The incremental revenue, what number will it, I have actually never used incrementality software. What number will it spit out?
Well, so there's different. So
right.
let's say like a meta conversion lift study is going to tell you, of the $400,000 of, what did we say?
200.
Of the $200,000 of reported revenue, only 50,000 of it was actually incremental.
Right. So you would have gotten the 150 anyway. So you spent $100,000 to get 50.
So now your actual IROAS
yes.
is the term, would be 50.
Yeah. So it's a 0.5
over your spend.
Yeah.
0.5 exactly. Okay. Instead of the 2. So
Whoops.
now what? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but now what you can do is you can assume that the people, what they do is they take a weighted factoring to their meta reported number.
Yeah.
Or you could set your cost control. Let's say you wanted a 1x, you would set your cost control at a 4x.
Right, right.
Right? Same thing with PMAX. So
right.
It actually gives you the relationship that you can now understand how to set your cost control.
Yeah. So you said this all ultimately reinforces for you. Meta is really incremental. PMAX is a disaster.
I don't know. Did you see this video that I did?
No, I did not watch it. I saw that you said it.
The idea is that if you think about incrementality as existing on 2 axes, on the x-axis is your optimization setting, and then on the y-axis is your exclusion or your targeting. And so the more that you obligate, I call it a physical action, an actual click, and you measure it in a short window, and the tighter your exclusions are, the more incremental the ad spend is.
Yeah.
Right. So the worst example, like I call it the most criminal ad product of all time, is display remarketing on a 28-day click, 28-day view measurement.
Yeah. Right.
It's basically not incremental at all.
Ad roll.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Criteo, ad roll, etc. So that's like the least incremental thing, because It's just literally a display ad that someone happens to see, and you
They
measure their
didn't
view
even
on
look
a
at it,
28-day
right?
window.
Yeah,
It's
they didn't.
insane, right?
Yeah.
Versus the most incremental, which I mean this relatively incremental, is that if you run a 1-day click with the tightest possible exclusions, if you actually are able to generate revenue, you are likely the platform is going to underreport the actual impact.
Right.
So in those cases, we see like when we run 7-day click or 1-day click in Meta, we actually see incremental factors that will increase the ROAS.
Yeah, I remember you said this in your podcast in a way that actually interested me. You said, I believe you said that some of the readings you were saying is that the actual closest reading to the true value sometimes was 28-day click plus 1-day view.
Yeah.
So that essentially that was like mostly all incremental.
That's right. Yeah. So that you oftentimes, so 7-day click, the thing I put in my tweet was that if I was running 7-day click on an incrementality basis, I would by default use like a 25% increase to the ROAS as the actual incremental impact just on .com. Forget if you add Amazon or anything else. And when we run incrementality studies, we see it as high as 250%. That the actual incremental ROAS is 2.5 times the platform reported number. There's this giant trope that people think Meta or over-reports, and it massively under-reports.
Yeah, I've thought this for a long time. It's really crazy. So you're saying even on a 28-day click basis,
on a 7-day click.
Okay,
basis.
yeah. Well, so I've
use a lot of
28-day click forever. Yeah.
Yep.
And I have basically done what you suggest, what you're saying here, which is I actually build my bid caps, my TROAS targets, or cost caps, as the case may be. I build them with an adjustment for a purchase multiplier.
Yeah.
That is basically assuming that 28-day click is right.
Incrementality validates. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're just giving exactly what we want an actual answer for.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, before we were talking, you said, "Hey, have you been thinking about incrementality?" To me, you said that to me. Like, so what? I mean, what are the other big takeaways here? Like, give me the.
Well, so I think that one, just understanding that, like, so House is one of the players in the space. Measured as our close preferred partner. House just raised $20 million. Like I say that as a way to give you the sense of demand. Now, my honest belief is that the cost of this is going to $0. I have heard that it's on Shopify's roadmap to offer geo holdout testing using their data. Meta already offers conversion lift studies for free. Google is now offering conversion lift studies for free. There's no reason that you should be paying $10,000 a month to get incrementality testing. You can get access to it for way cheaper than that. And it's not a business, it's a feature. It's a math equation that can actually be done fairly easily. So people can get access to this for cheaper for sure, but it is happening everywhere, and it is becoming the primary starting point to determine target setting in channels for brands that are ruthlessly committed to making sure that they can drive incremental contribution dollars.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think part of the reason I haven't paid that much attention to it is because I tend to work with smaller brands that have less total channels. So it's
a little easier.
It's really easy, right? You just look at Meta ads relative to new customer revenue, and it's pretty clear what's driving the value.
And what I'll say is, like, 7-day click, if you're using a 1-2 factoring or whatever already, like, you're going to be really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if anything, the only thing I think it might be a reason to validate is you might be under.
I have at least one client for whom I've thought about this for, and maybe a couple. So yeah, I think that's
so this, I'm going to show you something so you can look at this. You can describe what you're seeing. So this is how Measured reports. You'll see the tactic, the media spend,
percent incrementality, measure Facebook
IROS,
prospecting 127%, Google PMAX 42%.
That's right.
Yeah.
And look at some of these Advantage Plus campaigns. So this is the actual IROS versus what Meta's reporting.
Yeah.
So you can see that, like, the reason I think it's important is that if you were running this, the client might be meh, but if it's actually that's scale to the moon, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you can repeatedly see how bad like, everything else is.
Yeah.
Is that, like, it is just universally the case that every channel that we run this for, and you can get this for
this is exactly what everybody has been suspicious of for a long time, right? Well, I mean, at least maybe I'm saying everybody. This is what I've been suspicious of for a long time. It's the reason why. So let me ask another question. What happens when you do this forget Google, because everybody already hates PMAX, right? Although it seems like we should hate it more from some of the data that you've been putting out.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, anyway, what about when you do this for like TikTok or something, TikTok ads?
Yeah. So same thing. TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest. It's all garbage.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing.
How sure this is right?
I mean, again,
what's your confidence
right.
level in the math here?
The challenge. So let's just talk a little bit about how it happens. They go through and they model geographic regions that are indicative. There's two ways to do this. I'm going to talk about measured for a second, and you go into your ad account and you exclude those DMAs, states from your allocation.
Yeah, okay. And you see what revenue they do. Yeah.
That's right. And they model the revenue before and after.
Yeah.
So they have a predicted amount of revenue and they have a synthetic spend prediction, and they can tell you what happened as a result. They back test it to see how accurate it is. Obviously, the more data you have, the more consistent the behavioral set. There's all sorts of ways to introduce error into that kind of problem. Now, Meta's is even a conversion lift study on Meta is even better because they can actually truly hold out customer demos. They don't have to depend on state isolations, etc. They can literally create a holdout cell and do it even more accurately. And then Google has their methodology goes even further, which is that their regions, they find like regions where the shopping behavior is actually similar between city A and city B. And then they create the holdout that way. So it's a little bit more advanced in terms of the selection process.
Yeah.
So how certain am I that it's right?
Certain enough.
As certain as any other information that I have to make a decision.
What about, have you run this with any non-conversion optimized Facebook ads?
Yeah.
What's the takeaway on that?
Brutal.
So
you can see, here's some Facebook awareness. There's your media spend. There's your incremental impact. It's zero. There's literally nothing.
Yeah. Right.
So this is a big way, and right now,
TikTok prospecting, zero. Same as Facebook awareness.
It's like literally $230. Like it's just it's amazing to me. And what I appreciate about Meta, and this is a shout out to Meta versus Google, is Meta is actually totally willing to grade their own homework right now. And I've seen their conversion lift studies show that their accounts are a disaster.
Yeah.
And they own it. They go through it. Google is really hesitant to do this because they know their ad products are in real trouble when you do.
Yeah.
But they're actually being forced into it now.
Have you done Twitter?
Yeah. So there's Twitter is on here.
On this one. Okay. Yeah. I'm curious because I've heard some little bits of chatter.
It's like 65%, I think.
That's pretty decent.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It's really important.
You can still make it work, right? Because
it doesn't mean there's no incremental impact. It just means you need to adjust your target accordingly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, okay. Yeah. This one was 62% for the Twitter right there.
It's not bad.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, because if you're getting a 3-to-1 and you get 62% of that, that's enough. Probably.
That's right. Exactly. So here's any of these channels have incremental impact. The question is just, what does that mean? You need
relative to what they say in the dashboard.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's the thing that everybody's been looking for so long. And that's why they went to attribution tools and all that kind of stuff. But this is just, that's interesting.
Because the key for me is I need to understand where to set my cost control. And so what attribution doesn't answer that question for me. This answers that question because it gives me a relationship to the platform reported number. So that's why I find it more helpful.
Okay. That's really interesting. Okay. What's next? That's good. Anything else you want to say about incrementality?
No, I think your
PMAX thing is interesting. If it's in general, if it's actually 33%,
it is.
I sent that to a client who's running a bunch of PMAX and was like, "Hey," and then I think somebody brought up in the responses to that, "What if you're already excluding branded search?" And then you said 50%.
Yeah.
So it's like still
very problematic. And a lot of that has to
I've kind of wondered for a long time if I was undervaluing Google.
It's because Google's default attribution model is 33-1. And when you use PMAX, you introduce display, YouTube, and other things. So if you got to feed only brand excluded.
Let's argue about this. Why? Okay. So, I mean, because display remarketing, you said, is the famous.
Exactly. It's terrible.
Yeah. So why? I mean, if PMAX is going to have that. Oh, you said you're going to go to feed only?
No, I'm saying that's why it's poorly incremental, even when you exclude brand terms, is because the attribution model is 33-1.
So why not go back and assume, I just think a Google search click or a Google search term, right? Let's say leggings, okay? Categorical term, so non-branded, okay, is real different than a YouTube ad, let's say, because a YouTube ad is attempting to create demand, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
It depends on who you're targeting,
but it's outbound relative to inbound. And so those are so different that even the idea
unless it's being showed on a website visitor.
Yeah. Well, exclude those. Right.
But again,
so make it prospecting. Tight exclusions.
Follow the y-axis. Yeah.
Right.
So any ad.
So my point is, like, why blend them together at all? Why not separate? Why not run the incremental study separately? Because maybe standard shopping and maybe YouTube and display remarketing and search all have different incremental values, right? And so why blend them all together into PMAX in the first place?
Well,
why not separate them?
To me, it's the same thing as, and this is where I think we had this text exchange where I think it's the same reason you don't isolate IG feed versus IG stories or anything else, is because I actually think that the primary value with advertising is reaching a specific user wherever they are. I actually think the incremental value is often the customer more than it is the placement. And so the value, what you don't want to do is constrain access to a person, because the person, when in market, is what you're trying to reach wherever they're at, more than it is about the specific trying to get more people who are on YouTube.
So then the non-incremental aspects of those channels then are because the channel is incapable of
generating clicks,
of doing the thing that Meta is the best at and has been the best at for a long time, which is putting the right ad in front of the right person.
I don't actually think that's the problem. I think it's that the people don't click.
Okay. So, but then, I mean, that's really different for, again, standard shopping versus YouTube. People click on standard shopping ads.
For sure. I think standard shopping's great.
So why combine them up at all? Why not separate them out and run the incrementality test separate? That's what I'm saying. Why bother with PMAX is really what I'm saying. What's the point of
that PMAX has more volume, right?
Yeah.
Is that
but do you want that?
If I know the incremental factor and I can set my TROAS in the PMAX relative to the incremental factor, then my assumption would be I could get more volume. That it's the same thing as Yoni's argument that you should run 7-day click, 1-day view, but set a target higher than running just 7-day click. It's just the idea that I could get more potential volume in that way
within a blended average, and you're willing to have some non-incremental display remarketing mixed in there because the net result is still more efficient volume total.
As long as I know the incrementality factor of that campaign and the distribution doesn't suddenly change. Now, the challenge with incrementality tests is that they are a historical result, not a predictive result.
So if you ramp up your budget on PMAX and suddenly it just gives you a bunch more display remarketing, your incremental factor changes.
Could be problematic.
I think this is a really good argument for splitting it out.
Yeah.
I mean, all I hear when you see this is like, unless there's so much more volume with PMAX, it just feels like.
I don't have a problem if standard shopping is where people want to live in Google. I think it's their best ad product. Yeah. I think it's probably the safest way to play the game. So you are obviously, you got a big sponsor here for this pod.
Yes.
We're big fans of them. More staffing. Out in the Philippines, correct?
Morestaffing.co/AF. Go visit it right now. I've hired my team through them.
Yeah. So you have 100 employees through More Staffing. And there is a growing trend. We just launched this past month something called the CTC Global Accelerator, which is a service dedicated exclusively to providing 7-figure brands support through international labor.
You found literally the best employee in the world, though.
Literally.
I mean, people don't know. You're tweeting about this and people are going to be like, oh, you're just promoting your product. Like I'll tell you really honestly, I talked to one client of mine and told them, I think it's possible you should leave me and go to this program because this person is so good.
Yeah.
And that the economics will work better for your business.
Yeah. And the price of it, no one can beat this price. So it's $5,000 and you get basically our full growth service, but it's because we have outsourced international labor led by a young man in India named Joy. And
Joy did 2 coaching calls with me. I think probably because you told him to, is my guess.
No, he just does that.
If
I talked well about you, he would go,
okay. And then he was like, okay, thanks. I think we're good. And he said something like this. And I was talking to him on these calls and just like, he wasn't giving me a lot of response, but what I could read, he was going like, you idiot. I already know all of this.
Yeah. I've absorbed you. Okay. I've moved on.
Yeah. Right. I could just tell he just wasn't that interested in the content. And I needed some feedback. Like, tell me, do you need me to go to a different place here? Yeah. Whatever. But I just think he was like, no, I'm smarter than you. I don't need this. Yeah.
So, and we have 50 leads this month that we can only take 5. And the demand is just insane for this. It's what brands need more than anything is cheap quality service at that size of business. But the point is, the reason we're going to suffocate every small US agency in the world is because you can't small US agency with US full-time labor make money at the price that I can offer and make money because international labor is so good and so cheap. And this is a problem for US labor generally. And the point of this topic was that You're all in on hiring this way.
Yeah.
We're watching this happen all the time. I'm looking at this going, these employees might actually swallow my CTC business at some point because they're so talented and the quality of applicant is so high. And this trope that this is like VAs doing busy work is so wrong.
It's completely wrong.
And it's just, it's a huge threat to domestic labor. And Bill D'Alessandro, who's a client of yours and a friend
of both of us.
He sent me a message when we were talking about this on Twitter the other day. And he said, basically, like, I think this is the biggest macroeconomic narrative in the United States in the future. And I'm trying everything I can to find some way to make a financial bet on what happens to markets when all the US labor basically collapses because outsource is cheaper and more effective.
Maytab, in my interview with him the other day, he said Canadians are 30% cheaper than the US. Like, you don't even have to think about this as like Philippines or Latin America or whatever it is. Like, the UK is like meaningfully cheap, you know? So, it's a really big deal. I mean, to the point about quality, this is the thing I try to say in my ad reads for More Staffing all the time is like, and I've had Greg Carey on, who was the guy who, Greg founded More Staffing with their CEO, Laura, out of his e-commerce business. Cause he said it was like for him as an operator, when like I did an episode, you should go listen. It's sponsored. So like very, you know, it's lower listen count than my other stuff, but like, it's a very good interview. He talked about like for him, when he went and did this, he found that like a light bulb went off and suddenly like all of these things that he was thinking about like were free from his brain. And because I've talked to Laura from More Staffing and one of her business partners, Glyza, right? Like what I can tell you is like, they are the two smartest supply chain people I've come across on all of e-commerce.
That's right.
They are so good. It is stupid. They're so good. And so, you know, I think it's interesting. I mean, do you want to go towards the how to make money off of this, or do you want to go towards the what's going to happen to the U.S. labor market? Because one thing I wonder is if the counter to that is if you and I are so plugged into this world of this kind of thing that it isn't catching on quite as broadly. But I don't know. Markets do a good job.
Then think about
support
like,
Shepherd, right?
Exactly. Like how many businesses like that are there?
A lot.
Like Jesse Puggi created one. You've got More Staff. Like there's like 100 of them. That are growing really, really fast. And it's like, this is the most recent, the newest employee for the CTC Global Accelerator is Nikev, and he's from Trinidad and Tobago, and he has a master's in statistics and has been running credit risk at a bank. Like versus a U.S. media buyer.
Imagine me versus him working through a spreadsheet.
Exactly, and this is
not even close.
And then you add in the price cost of an entry level U.S. media buyer relative to this, and the delta is so wide that I don't think this is what people are ready for. Is that the discrepancy is so dramatic that it's kind of crazy to think about not sourcing. It's just the problem is it's still cumbersome. It's hard to. The networks aren't really very developed. So as that continues to mature and get solved, and more countries get unlocked, and more people realize that they can make money this way. I know.
Here's the bet I would make right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
Start an e-commerce business. And staff the whole thing.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
It said like this is the thing we talk about all the
labor
time.
Leverage.
Right? Yeah.
Or you know where there's more labor leverage than where this specific
services. Yeah.
Like, one of the things I've thought about doing is that I've thought about making a massive financial bet on publicly traded service businesses, because I think that they're all going to go
do this
between AI and outsourced labor leverage.
They're going to all generate
benefits more than the company who all their cost
is people.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
I've watched my margin double in 14 months, like in a way that is just it's hard to understand how much more.
That is the most compelling thing you've told me about why I should push into agency. That there's a margin opportunity related to those things that I'm not.
And you have the
about.
relationship already here.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I mean, the
question is More Staffing, is their talent e-commerce related though?
I always tell, I have designers and editors there. I think like, I haven't tried to hire them for media buyers and email people or anything like that. I think this is actually one of the things that I think is sort of silly that people do is they'll be like, I don't know, are there good like email people there? It was like the Philippines is like 150 million people, right? Like, what do you mean? Are there good? Yes, they are there somewhere. Like, like, how do you evaluate that? You get their resumes and then you interview them the same way you would with a U.S. employee. Why would you just write off on the front end the idea that like there's nobody in the Philippines who can do email well? Like, it just seems crazy to me. So what I know for sure about More Staffing, at least, is that they have particular expertise in supply chain, and part of that is geographic. It's because it's a puddle jump to China from the Philippines.
Yep.
So it just, there's like a geographic advantage to that, to where they can get in and out of China very fast and quickly and get to major manufacturing areas and go meet manufacturers and hang out with them. And so like, I think especially on that side of the business, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's like the I was listening to on the Operators podcast for somebody who's talking about China and how, like, of the world's like tooling experts, like there's like 100 of them that are like the absolute pinnacle level relative to the amount that exists in the United States, just because that's the concentration of skill there.
Right.
So what's happening though is like, so that's sort of like the Philippines thing, right? Which is like, if all of a sudden all these outsourced labor are going into a specific sector, does skill bubble up there in a way that, in the way that it seems like
that's probably real.
Like Israel software development for e-commerce.
That's right.
Suddenly there's all these people there that
right.
they build these companies, and then the skill spills over. And so it's really interesting to think about like the downstream consequence. Like one of the things I've thought, I don't know, do you run any ads to the Philippines for any brands? It's like $1.25 CPMs, 8-cent clicks.
Right.
Like if there's any development to the actual e-commerce infrastructure there,
selling
like,
there.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And that's like an interesting thing, is they get more connected into the US markets.
This is like the other thing about this is like, I just like sort of love it in one sense, because it's like it creates opportunity in these places for people in a way that is like so financially beneficial to them that I think is like,
well, if you're into globalization and not a nationalist.
Well, I am.
Okay.
So if you want to talk about that, we can.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't begin to understand all of the complexities of that conversation, but I like all people. So that's
cool.
There you go. What about, do you disagree with that?
No, big global elitist. No, I'm a big fan of globalization.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I remember Mike Beckham talking about at Simple Modern, just like when they built a manufacturing facility in Oklahoma City, he was just talking about like how much of a pain it was to sort of get the tools he needed or something fixed or whatever, because there just is no infrastructure. They're in the same way, and so there is this thing. And I wonder if there is an element where you want to tap into different pockets of like, go get your supply chain people in the Philippines, and then go get your, whatever. If you could go find sort of what those different places and people are because of all those things. And I mean, I have found that there's some interesting things that people sort of can undervalue with that, like cultural distinction does matter and the way people relate to one another. I heard a really interesting comment from one of the folks at More Staffing. Actually, she lives in Colorado now, and she and I were having lunch together. She said, the thing you got to remember is that we were a colonized and conquered people for a really long time. So, and so that still is in there a little bit, and it's sort of ingrained that we say yes to the person above us. And so you have to really work hard and really make it explicit that you want us to go outside of the directions, or whatever. But she's like, people will. They're smart, talented, creative people, just like anywhere else, And that kind of stuff, I think, is one of the challenges with global hiring. Is like, it's very hard to be attentive to cultural values like that, and to sort of see them happening in front of you, and to figure out why people aren't doing that. But look, cultural values are hard in America too. It's not necessarily the case that it's only there. Look, you heard us talking about it. Offshore labor in the Philippines makes all the sense in the world, and you could do it with my friends at More Staffing, who have helped me build my team and can help you build yours. I just got another piece of positive feedback about a great employee in an e-commerce business staffed through More Staffing. You should go reach out to them to go get yours going as well. The value proposition is really simple. You can attract incredible talent in the Philippines with deep e-commerce resumes. Do not think of this as just getting a virtual assistant. Look for A players who are really, really good across every part of your business. And you will attract great talent because you will pay more than local Philippines rates, and you will pay at the same time significantly less than that same talent in the US. Everybody wins when you do that. Go to morestaffing.co/AF, morestaffing.co/AF to go work with the people who are helping me staff my business. This is a good business bridge. Talk about Driveline, because
I'm actually like, this is I owe you a big thanks for this. This is like a cool experience I'm getting to have. That's really a byproduct of, of you. So, you obviously worked with Drive. What?
Tell me. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. So thank you. Thank you for building a relationship with Mike and the team at Driveline.
Yeah.
You want to explain to people what Driveline is real fast?
Yes.
You'll do it better than me.
If you really want to get to know Driveline, you should go back and listen to my interview with Driveline, with Mike Rathwell, the CEO of Driveline Baseball. As I said to you last time, we talked about them a little bit last time. One of the most interesting businesses in the world, I think. It is not too much to say, they revolutionized not only baseball, but all of pro sports.
Yep.
And the revolution is still happening to some degree, but it is mostly, at least in medias res, right? It's like it's happening. It is happening for real across there. And it's because they revolutionized the way baseball players get trained by bringing huge amounts of measurability to training. Anybody who's played sports knows this feeling, right? A coach tells you to go do a thing and you listen to what the coach says because the coach told you to do it. And theoretically, that's going to make you better at the sport or the thing, right? The problem is, what happens when the next coach tells you something different?
Right.
And how do you know the coach's advice is right or whatever it is, right? So what they did is they brought measurability to training and really applied the idea of deliberate practice, which is a well-studied thing, to baseball and to baseball training. And then they also applied some really specific practice tactics, basically, to baseball. And the result is a really fascinating services business. They actually are a hybrid service, e-commerce, software business. They have all three. And it's a really, really cool thing. And you and I both knew Driveline. We've known them for a long time because we're big baseball nerds. Yep. And so they were a client of mine for a little while, and you played pro baseball. And so anyway, there you go.
Yeah. So I think you must have just, we must have come up in conversation together along the way, because at some point Mike just reached out to me on Twitter and we just started talking all the time. And so we would just jam about stuff.
I reference your ideas like they're my ideas all the time.
Yeah. So and Mike's on Twitter, and so we've interacted. And so my sons are 10 years old, and what I've learned about trying to coach them in baseball is that I'm a bad baseball coach. Is that I thought erroneously, and I don't really know why, but that being a good baseball player would make you a good baseball coach. And it is definitely not true, especially to little kids. Like, the language is all different. Their bodies move different. Like, almost
it's
nothing
so hard.
I knew translated in a way that was, other than being energetic and fun. Like, but mechanically trying to help them get better, I find myself constantly frustrated, not knowing what to do.
Yeah. Coaching is a different skill set than the actual playing. It's really hard.
Entirely. And so I wanted to start learning how to be better at it and feeling a responsibility to help my kids develop. And in a weird way, like they more pressure in baseball in particular, like feeling like, Dad, like you should be able to help me with this thing. Like, and so I've read a bunch of Driveline stuff. I buy all their gear. Like so I'm sort of an evangelist and disciple, but I now want to go and try and get even deeper. And so I asked Mike, I said, hey, would you be open to me coming up and spending a few days watching you guys teach kids and getting to learn and ask questions?
The Driveline Academy, their kids program, is the coolest thing. Yeah. It's so cool.
So I wanted to just go be a fly on the wall, see their process, and learn from them about coaching as much as I could. And he was like, perfect. I'll trade you. If you come in and talk with me about services, businesses, and e-commerce and the things you have going on, we'll do it. Here's the dates. And so I'm flying up there in the first week of September to go spend 3 days just watching Driveline train kids. And there's probably 1,000 things I can learn.
You better go hit baseballs in your underwear too.
I'm going to try.
You should put video of you hitting baseballs in your underwear. So they motion capture you and they read you back your biomechanical data, so we can find out like how hard Taylor can hit the ball and some of those things. That needs to go on Twitter. Taylor in your underwear. That'll get clicks.
So what's funny is like they actually have a similar problem to CTC in some ways, which is that their talent constantly gets poached by other organizations who pay their people more money and move on. Now they have an even bigger draw than our people do, which is their talent gets poached by MLB
Major League teams. Yeah.
So their people go work for the Dodgers,
one of the coolest jobs in the world.
Exactly. So, but they have the same thing, which is like, how do we think about how much is systems and process versus people and talent, and how do we keep them? And so I'm excited to get to chat with them about that and talk about training and also learn about how to train kids. Yeah. And one of the things he talks about early on, he said, the number one thing you're going to learn is you talk too much. And then you're going to talk less, and you're going to realize you still talk too much. And the key is to create environments, what they call training environments, which is create the circumstance where kids can get their own feedback and make their own adjustments relative to you trying to talk at them.
Well, there's a couple fascinating principles in there that I have learned that I mean, it would be hard for me to design the training environment quite like that. But like one of them is that in sports, like people's bodies are already really good at cueing them. Yeah. Right. So like one of the things I say is there is no perfect swing. Like actually the best swingers in baseball are people who can adjust their swing in real time really, really fast and can barrel balls, whatever, you know? So So there are some principles that matter, for swinging a bat fast and whatever else, and like bat speed matters and blah, blah, blah. But like, there's no perfect swing. So they like are trying to say like your body actually cues you really, really well. I shouldn't parrot their stuff too much because I don't want to misrepresent it, but your body cues you really, really well. And so this like goes into the don't talk too much thing, where you create drills that would allow and use tools that would give the body feedback that it needs without you as a coach having to say, move your hands differently. Right. So they have these soft balls that you hit that are like, sandbags basically. Right. Like small little balls full of sand anyway. And so you can feel exactly if you hit the ball right, and it cues your body back, because it's full of sand, and it's sort of like donuts funny if you hit it the wrong way or whatever. Right. So there's that. So they create a tool that actually leverages your body's ability to go and get feedback. And then they say like, oh, people are more engaged with their training if it's fun and if it's a competition. And so just like, think about this. If you and I did a typing test, like we joked about earlier, right? You and I would type faster than we normally would do, right? And even then if you told us to practice typing. And it's because like competition makes you want to get better and want to be your best or whatever. So, okay, so create an environment where there's a competition involved instead of just like hitting a kid endless ground balls and saying, here's the fielding triangle or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And so it's a really fascinating thing because I after spending time with them, I've thought a lot about like, how in the world could we create those kinds of things in business principles? Is there some way? And even for them, it would be interesting to ask them, like, are you trying at all with your employees to create sort of like team training environments? It's so much less physical of an activity that's hard to think about. Like, what are the feedback mechanisms you give somebody if you want to teach somebody media buying? How do you give them the right feedback mechanism so that they get cued without you sitting in a meeting and coaching them?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So one of the things I've thought about, if you think about the environments that we occupy, and we've talked about this before, is that what data should you show someone in Ads Manager? So like I think that we've joked all the time about like
eliminate everything but spend.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I've never actually done it.
Neither have I.
But I wonder why. Like how much would it alter behavior if the only thing somebody could see was spend?
Yep.
And so I think that's an example. There's also another thing I've thought about is, have you heard of this, Poised AI?
No.
Okay, so Poised AI is a tool that you can put onto a Zoom call that shows you how your words per minute that you're talking while you're talking, and your tone. So for me,
it would give me many words per minute.
Right. So it shows you your pace, your tone in the middle of a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking, it'll go red when you cross a threshold that's sort of scientifically proven to be like, people aren't understanding. And so it just gives me that feedback instantaneously. And imagine that versus someone telling me, Taylor, you talk too much, you should practice these things, versus just the data signal instantly showing up makes me go, okay.
Yeah. That's a training environment. It's a decision you set up in how you set up your way of doing the thing.
That's right.
That gives you the feedback that you want. And I think, like careful thinking about that kind of thing is like a very fascinating idea. I tried to think about this with like, e-commerce and stuff. And I just don't know. I don't know. There are people who are good at this though. There are people who are really good at building like the right dashboards and the right, daily feedback tools and making sure they don't have the wrong one. There's one that I sort of like that I think is that I use with clients that is like a weekly report on a few key metrics. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what those ways you could do this are. And it probably is worthy of deeper thinking. Yeah, somebody who is listening to or watching this should help us think about this.
My other thing is right across the street from here, my kids go to this soccer training place called Toka. Okay. And Toka is a brilliant business. It's actually, I think, closest to what the consumer version of Driveline could be, but is you go in and they've created this product, which is these little mini goals that have a sensor around them. Then there's a big screen with software on it. And then they created these balls, which is basically like a size 2 soccer ball. So imagine a ball that's smaller than all other soccer balls, okay? And there's a machine that shoots balls out. So you have 2 little goals with frames and sensors, and they come in and they put you in and they start with an assessment. And they work through a series of collect, pass, how fast you touch it, how your response time, the accuracy.
Driveline starts with an assessment too. They do the same thing.
So your kid comes in, they don't say a word. There's a coach in there operating the machine. They don't say one word.
Yeah.
The kid goes through the whole assessment. At the end,
they tell you exactly how good you are.
Exactly.
Right.
So now we have a baseline.
So, because like immediately that is so valuable.
So compelling too.
Right. The idea that like you could know how good you are and what parts you're good at and what parts you're not good at. You know, that's so,
and so then they take you through, then based on the areas of improvement, they have pre-programmed extra drills.
This is absolutely Driveline for soccer. Yeah.
And so you go in and my kids, I drop them off. They love it. They have so much fun. The coach doesn't say anything to them. It's all feedback on the software and the exercise and whatever. And they get way better at that. They get better. And by the end of it, they can show you that they got better.
Yes, right. So because they reassess.
Yes. Here's the speed of your kick. Here's
so how do we do that? How do you get somebody not just to do the thing you want them to do, but to assess, train the right thing next, isolate the skill, you know, because maybe forget the AI conversation for a second, but like maybe like ad writing is a skill or ad ideation is a skill versus media buying, you know, like, and so how do you know, and then you reassess, you know, how do you give people those feedback mechanisms? Yeah. So we think about this like at CTC, we have what we call growth maps, and we have a sequence of behavior that everyone in the growth map has to participate in. We call it one map, and the way that they enter in these things all gets tracked, and then people's responses, their frequency of completing the action gets tracked and responded to and gets displayed publicly inside of the organization. So in this way, we have a collective set of behaviors that at the very least, we want them to get better at the behavior. We track it, map it, set expectation around it, and display results. So that's a pretty common training modality, right? Is that here's an expectation, here's clarity of training of action, here's an assessment and clear visibility to your completion of that action to the level that's expected. And that kind of thing is like, it's good to create like a robotic set of behaviors. It doesn't solve skill development.
Skill development.
That's what I was going to say. It's like, it's a different thing, right? Yeah. And that's like the sort of the missing thing, you know, is like, Now
the question is, could you come up with behaviors that in so much that they're done repeatedly do lead to skill development?
Right. And I actually think you are doing that right now. Like, it seems like your people are coming out of your thing because the behaviors ladder to the outcomes, and then the outcome that everybody sees is a more profitable business on the other end of it. So that like doing that, actually what it reinforces for you is that they're doing the right behaviors. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to orient towards. What do I want you to consider all the time? And so I'm going to obligate you to a task of consideration. And so if a task is to describe to me what was yesterday's performance, which campaigns were ahead or behind, that's like what a map node entails. Doing that every day is a behavior of constant analysis. And constant analysis is a thing that leads to better critical thinking and understanding. So there is some way in which the behavior does develop thoughtfulness or skill, especially if it's given feedback. If those notes are sort of left unruly, they could say anything. But if you have oversight and you provide question and follow up to it, then there's sort of like almost like a Socratic way to have dialogue about ideas. And well, and it'll be interesting to see what you say to them about their business problem of major league teams poaching their employees too. That's a hard one to solve, but I know you've worked really hard on it. I mean, well, there's actually Kyle Bodie's a good follow on this, the founder of Driveline. At Kyle Bodie, I think on Twitter, because he's very AI forward. You know, he's like really just tried to embrace it and figure out how to keep using it. And I mean, it's a baseball training company founded by a guy who's a programmer, you know, and so totally. I think the question, and it's the same thing I ask all the time at CTC, is like, what is the human really doing? Really, what are they doing? If you actually could define their tasks this week, what did they do? And I got into a sidebar conversation with Cam, who's like the head of advertising at Hexclad, about staffing and how because in one of my 25 hot takes, I said that like everybody has twice as many employees. And as an employee, that's probably a nightmare thing to hear, because one, he's like, feels like we always have too much to do. And I was like, that's not because of the employees. Right. That actually has nothing to do. If you hired wrong signal. Twice as many employees, you'd still feel that way. There's infinite things to do. Right. So of course there's too much to do. That's actually the default state. You should never respond to that. But what I said is, before I would allow anybody to hire ever, I would want to understand what everybody's tasks are and figure out which tasks we could eliminate before I would hire anybody else. Right. And this has been a big thing at CTC, is that
so often early on in a service business in particular, I would respond to people saying we need more people.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's hire another person
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
like, what could we make other people not do
Yeah.
before we hired somebody else?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, here's my training thing recently. Totally unrelated.
Yep.
I think you had put in the original random show thing, like let's do something about like physical training stuff. And I think partly you had been thinking about this from some of your own training. I know like you did Murph this year, RX for the first time, which is really awesome. I have been thinking about mental training a little bit. Okay. So not physical training really at all. I have been thinking a little bit about mental training. And this is like, for anybody who meditates regularly, they're all going to be like, yeah, dude, this is why everybody's been talking about meditation, probably, I think. But I don't meditate regularly. And I've never been able, I've tried a few times, right? And I've never really been able to get into it. And at least not the kind of meditation that I think people think of when they think of that term. But what I've been thinking about, here was actually the thought starter for me, and I'm curious what you'll think of this. I went and saw Deadpool versus Wolverine the other night. Okay. It's funny. Yep. As I expected it to be. It did not ask profound questions, right?
This wasn't mental training?
It was not mental training. It actually made me, so I walked away and I was thinking about like, what is the value of that and what place does it have in my life? And just to be upfront about this, I'm not saying no one can ever go watch a fun movie. Okay. I'm not saying that. It just, for whatever reason, I've watched a million fun movies in my life. And I just was thinking about it this time for whatever reason. Okay. So I don't know, maybe someday I will say you can never watch a fun movie. Right. But right now I'm not saying that. But it made me think about like, it felt like the equivalent of eating an extremely large cinnamon roll, or something like that. Yeah. I love cinnamon rolls. Actually, that's not a good example because I thought Deadpool was okay. But it was movie junk food. You get the idea, right? Yep. Maybe another analogy that I think is not totally far off is it felt a little bit like getting movie obliterated, and just like really hammered movie wise, where you're just like immersed in this for 2 hours and there's nothing else going on. And I was thinking about like, are there sort of second order consequences to that kind of movie indulgence, to use that way of thinking about it? And should I be thinking more about what goes into my mind and how much command I have over that? And sort of like, should I regulate the diet of my mental intake more carefully around things like that? And the other very obvious example is like time on Twitter and just some of those things, because I've certainly noticed the thing where it's like harder for me to sit and read a book now because I just like have the like, well, I don't know, what did Taylor tweet today? It's that kind of thing. So I've just been thinking like, should I be engaging more with like more actions built around I think the training framework is a helpful one. The idea of like making my mind work better for me, not only in the moment that I do the training, but actually for the broader effects, right? If I go and work out, it's not just for what I do during the workout, it's actually for the spillover effect on the rest of my life. So it's a very half-developed thought, but it was like just something I was thinking about the other night when I watched it. I'm just curious what you think about it.
So do you think that, like, have you ever played like an app like this?
What is it?
So this is something called Impulse. Okay.
No.
And it does it's like mental training. So you log in every day and there's like number memorization, match the pairs, like candy sort. Like
I've never done it.
They're intended to be that kind of idea,
right.
That like you get better at doing mental math. Like in the same, like, so it's fun. I sometimes will go on and just play whatever. They give you scores. They show you what percentile you are compared to other people. It's all the kinds of things that are
we
nice.
were just talking about this with Driveline,
exactly.
right? Yeah,
exactly.
It's like training environment where there's competition.
That's right. Now, I've never tried to see if like I've made a bunch of progress or if it's improving in some way. But if you think about like dementia or these other things, they do this kind of work to try and help people with brain elasticity and memorization and things like that. But one of the things I'll say about the content consumption is I think that one of the advantages that I have in our space is that I don't know that anybody consumes more content in our space.
Yeah.
And it's partially an unhealthy amount of Twitter consumption, but also podcasts. I just really like it. And so I just endlessly listen to it all day long. Like my phone screen usage is like 11 hours a day.
Can I tell you something? This is one of the reasons why I think that you and I think differently about what we're building, which is that I listen to almost none. I listen to you sometimes, but I don't have the love of the game quite like that, like you do. Yeah. So keep going.
And so I think that there is, now that's a very narrow application of mental training in a thing that's really only useful in a very narrow band. It doesn't make me good at chemistry.
Yeah.
But I do think that you can, so that's more about the content diet, is that being thoughtful about your content diet relative to the things you want in your life. I think one of the reasons I quit fantasy baseball is that I actually had to decide that spending as much time as I did reading about minor league prospects was actually counter to what the things I said I wanted in my life were.
Right.
And so I quit.
And because of a Shohei Ohtani scoring decision.
Yeah. And I had a complete and utter meltdown and anger over a ruling, an absurd ruling by probably Matt Morris, who I still blame in my head. But But yeah, so that kind of thing, I do think that the choice of the content diet relative to your goals should be aligned.
Yeah. That's actually, I think that is a helpful thought to what it is, because actually, as you're saying that, I'm evaluating this relative to some goals of mine, which are broader than this, which is like about my ability to stay focused in to read. Like, I value reading books about large topics, philosophical, theological topics.
So it's funny because I bet one of the things that's actually hard for you is that there's this other part of your life that's like supposed to occupy a lot of your mental.
My faith.
Yeah. And like getting rid of that created an immense amount of bandwidth in my life.
Yeah, I believe that.
Like a crazy amount.
Okay, so this is why I told you I wanted to talk with you more about this. This is exactly the kind of thing that I want to hear about more. Right. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Just that, narrowing the amount of things that I cared about actually made those decisions easier. In religion,
that's very
in particular, I felt an immense constant toil that every available moment of my brain should go towards that thing.
Okay, so here's so that's interesting, because here's an analogy I heard somebody say the other day, which is like, you want this is a Christian pastor theologian, right? He was talking about, he said, like, your faith should exist as an iceberg where like the large chunk of it is under the water, right? And there's a little bit over the top. And what he means by that is like, you just can't, here's a perfect example. I can't have this conversation with you and be thinking as we're talking about faith and about Jesus. It's what I mean by can't is like, it's actually like basically literally impossible. And in fact, the way that I serve you and the people who are watching and listening to this and sponsors or all whatever in this moment is to be as present as I possibly can with the conversation. And so if my faith has formed me in such a way that the version of my presentness includes the values that I care about, which would be like, listening to you, taking your opinion seriously, trying to think the best of you as we talk, whatever, all of these things that are there, those values maybe get formed in me in a way that is, I'm actually not thinking about, am I listening carefully to Taylor right now? I'm just being me. And hopefully being me has been formed by those decisions, like what content intake I have had over time. So the content intake, this is what I mean by the spillover effect. The content intake has all of these other impacts on my life. And then there's some really specific things, which is like I said, like I'm bothered by the fact that like it's harder for me to read as many pages in one sitting because my monkey brain goes Twitter crazy, so there's like, that's like a very specific thing. And that's where I think like a lot of people are sort of aware of this, right? Like just the sort of like, we're sort of dialed into the matrix all the time. But yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, what is the value of that kind of content and what, and how ought I to think about my content intake decisions? Your fantasy baseball example is a good one for that.
Yeah. I think also this is where I still experience you as playing. In life, which like to me and that's okay. Like it's not good or bad. It's just, I think that there's periods of life where you're sort of sampling on the content side, which is like, you're kind of trying to figure out whether it's what you enjoy or where to go deep or where you want to be all in, or maybe you're not all in right now and you're kind of just trying different things. And I'd say that for the last couple of years of my life, I just have a very narrower set of things.
This is so clear to me.
Yeah. It's like and even letting go of all of the other CTs, like closing down Dream Labs, getting rid of my participation in Bamboo Earth. Like I cut down so many just little open browser tabs in my brain. That I think that is it was underappreciated how much that took up.
Like, I believe that. And again, this is part of why I'm hesitant to go push in more on some things work-wise, because I think they will demand certain things of me in a way that I'm not sure I'm ready to do that. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Here's another actually interesting thing kind of related to that. And I don't know, I'm not making any judgment about what decisions you did and didn't make here, but like the other thing that I heard somebody say this recently. I think it's true. So we'll just leave it at that. That the actual thing that is most helpful for pushing off dementia is relationships.
Yeah.
And so like more than any like sort of overt mental training, it's like those kinds of things. And so there's this thing here. This is another thing I think about. Like if it's harder for me to sit and play with my 4-year-old because my Twitter brain is going crazy, or because whatever, I'm drinking in cinnamon roll content, and it's like, that is like a sensory content overload or whatever. There's a real cost to that in these other areas that is, or, if I,
maybe, I think you would have to assess the quality of your relationships.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And I think that
maybe is right. This is again, half
I think
developed.
that like relationships, like the quality of them, there are things that are like really destructive to them. There are things that are like sort of destructive to them. Yeah. And I think there's
also sometimes an impossible standard that people hold themselves to, right?
Well, but all the time, I think most people should try to, and it's hard to self-assess sometimes. So you can, maybe this is where good friends or other things matter, but is to be able to say like, yeah, how is my marriage? How is our relationship? Like to try and take stock of those things in a way that considers the experience of the other person, not just yourself, but to ask yourself, but also ask the other person in some way. Yeah. Is it seems like probably a good exercise to, and then to maybe try to diagnose if it has something to do with your attention being committed to Deadpool.
Yeah.
But you probably went with your wife, right?
No, she would not. She does not.
Oh, she's not a fan? Too much sarcasm.
No, she thinks Ryan Reynolds is funny. It's like a kind of gore that she's not interested in. The funny thing is she like loved John Wick. She likes shooter movies.
She likes to see like real live shooting of real humans versus like more animated.
But like, Wolverine and Deadpool stabbing each other endlessly and then regenerating and stabbing each other again. Not that interested. Yeah.
Let's just do a fun one real fast.
Yeah, great.
Do you know who Brady Feigl is?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You have to watch this. You're going to love this.
Okay. Let's get this so that everybody else can see it.
This makes me think we're living in the Matrix. Okay. So Brady Feigl.
We'll try and get this edited into
is the name of 2 minor league baseball players.
Okay.
Watch.
Oh, wait. He looks exactly like somebody else, right?
A guy named, listen to this. This is
Brady
Feigl I have heard about this.
6'4", fiery hair, glasses wearing, minor league baseball player. Brady Feigl is also a 6'4", fiery hair, glasses wearing, minor league baseball player.
That is incredible.
They have the same name. The Brady Feigls even took a genetic test after they discovered each other in 2016, and they're not even remotely related genetically.
Yeah.
It's almost
they have
like
the same beard and everything.
In the dimension with the 2 minor league Brady Feigls. That's the identifier of this timeline. Can we get a statistician on this? How many billionth chances just that they are doppelgangers and the same height and the same exact name?
And they both made it.
But they also both play minor league baseball?
Outside of my family, I didn't think there were any Feigls.
Look, we have to take certain things seriously. We should always empathize with the suffering of others, stand up against injustice. But this is the Matrix, and the architect is laughing. Let's not forget to laugh, too.
That's so funny.
Isn't that just the wildest thing?
That is so
Brady Feigl,
2 of them,
6'4" pitchers with red hair, and they're like, "You
what?"
It's just the wildest thing ever.
Man, there's no broader reflection there, right?
It was just the most fun I had watching a piece of content because it's such an overlap of my world. Yeah. And then seeing something, I was just like, I love the internet so much. It was it was delightful. So enjoy Brady Feigl.
Okay, let's do some some lightning round, kids and parenting stuff, and whatever else that we have left on our list here.
Did you watch that? About the, you know what this one is?
No.
So we talked about leaving your kids money, or we talked about this. Yeah. I'm actually. Can I say that I'm like an executor of your will, or if you die, or have some role?
You're like third in line to be the executor.
Great. Yeah. So I have some role. In
a couple other people have to die first,
if
but
Andrew
then it's
and his whole family are in some sort of tragic accident, then I have to give his children.
I forgot about that until right now, but
But so we've talked about this, like
Yeah.
how are you going to leave your kids their money?
Yeah.
And this was an idea I really liked, which was this person set up a family trust that issues 0% interest rate loans. That's the mechanism by which the kids can access money. That they have to be paid back on a certain term. It's part of the agreement, but you have access to 0 interest rate money.
Yeah.
So rather than ever giving them money,
What happens if you default on it?
I don't know. I don't know what all the terms of it are. Maybe you can't access more. Maybe there's some credit facility with it. But the idea is that you all contribute to the family trust over time, and it's a thing that gets paid back and built and passed down.
Yeah.
I just thought that was like a really novel concept, as like it's a real leverage advantage in life to have basically for your whole life a 0% credit facility.
Yeah.
But that ultimately what you borrow from it, you owe back to it.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
Really interesting. I'll tell you what my thought. That's really clever. My thought about how I will leave kids money at some point right now is I will try to do all of it before I die. That is my
give it to your kids before you die.
Yeah. So any money I'm going to give them would be given to them.
But what if you die right now?
So obviously that would be the way that doesn't work very well, right?
Like, it's like a movement of die with nothing or whatever. You're that.
I don't know if that's a movement or not, but I'm most attracted to that idea when I think about this problem right now, right? Which is like, how do you do that? I think there's another question, which is like, how much to give them?
Are you just gonna like randomly show up at their house with like bags of money and be like,
no, my hope is to explain it to them with total clarity. I mean, I one of the things I know about myself is that I grew up without much teaching about money. And so I developed better financial thinking way later than I would have liked to have. And so my hope is to teach my kids from a very early. I just started thinking about my 4-year-old, 2-year-old. Just started thinking like it may be time to now start giving him, a allowance or some kind of mechanism for beginning to teach him this concept that like things cost money. Because even like he wrote on my little Father's Day card he made me this year or whatever. It was like, Dad's job is to make money. And that's what it said, Like he doesn't know really what that means. He just knows that like that's why I can't play with him during the day, So I've like begun to think about that. So I think that what I would probably try to do is explain to them the decision from as early as possible and try to be really straightforward about it and to let them into the family finances earlier and to just tell them understand here's how we're thinking about our money. Here's how Mom and I are thinking about it. Here's what we're saving, here's what we're investing, here's what we're giving, here's what we're spending, all those kinds of things. So, and then from an early, just give them that. And that way there's also just like no post-death fighting about it and some of those things, at least I head it off. But I think there's a harder question, which is like how much to give them, because this is a classic problem of if you give them too little, do they resent it? If you give them too much, and Morgan Housel points this out, he's like, I just don't know what the answer is here. If you get rich, if you get like really rich, like, it's really hard to figure out how much money to give your kids. There are minds on every side, So
right now, I think my will, if I die early, is like 25% at 18, 25% at 25, and 50% at 30.
Yeah,
like it's like a tiered access based on their age.
Yeah.
It's just like the idea that I just can't imagine a scenario where at 18 years old you need
that much money. Yeah.
Not that
that's kind of one little goal I've thought about is like to make it so that even at that age they could think about it well. That they come into life thinking about that as an area of mastery that they can have. Just like set a high expectation around that. Okay. One for me, parenting wise, and some of those things is related is there's a lot of good advice. My wife is so good about like intaking tactics for parenting stuff. She's awesome at it, and it really matters. So I'm not at all saying what.
I'm just laughing at the caveat set up here to make sure
it's
that you're
not just her. It's not just her. It's a lot. There's lots of parenting advice about how to do it, and I've watched it work. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Okay. Right. But there's the AC. But it is incredible how much is caught versus taught from your kids. It blows my mind. Like, it is just like every time I see my 4-year-old or 2-year-old parrot something back to me that I do, it is the most terrifying thing about parenting. That's the simple thought.
I like it.
Yeah.
Lightning round.
Okay. What's yours?
That was my parenting.
Jiu-jitsu?
Oh yeah, this one. Okay. So, There is a gentleman on Twitter. I actually don't know much about him, so this is one of those things where I'm always terrified at what somebody's content actually is, because I could be like advocating for someone horrific here. So just caveat that I don't know Steve Stewart Williams very well, but
sure. But you like this?
I like when people share research, and he shared.
Oh, I've seen this guy. He is like a serious white nationalist.
No, you're stop it. It's not funny. You make me stressed out. But this is a data from psychology. It's a classic paper by psychologist Terry Moffat that shows how self-control measured in childhood correlates with a range of important adult life outcomes. So long story short, self-control is an all-purpose good like IQ. It predicts health, wealth, and all things good. Yep. Okay. One of my kids is a finger sucker. Yeah. He sucks his 2 fingers. Yeah. 10 years old. He still does it when he's sleeping sometimes. I may or may not shouldn't say that. But but we've thought a lot about how to help him solve this problem. Yeah,
sure.
He's functionally like addicted to it in a way. Right. He's done it since he was a tiny little baby. And so we've talked a lot about self-control. I have one child that's more emotional than the others. And so we've thought as parents a lot about this idea of self-control. And when I saw this data, I was like, man, that as a skill, I think about this in my own life, whether it's working out, business, like it seems like self-control is just the ability to move yourself towards what you desire with intention and purpose, independent external factors is immensely valuable.
It's part of the mental training thing for me is it fits into everything else I care about, is like exactly like that. Right.
That's right. And so I was like, oh, that's really
cool.
So
he said jujitsu helps with it?
Well, no. So he said this.
Makes that point. Okay.
That's right. And then I was on TikTok the other day and I saw Cody Sanchez talk about
exhibiting really good self-control going on TikTok.
Exactly. And she was talking about how jujitsu is a proven skill developer of self-control. Yeah. So kids who do jujitsu develop and improve statistically in their self-control. Yeah. So I was like, oh wow, that feels like a cool causal chain. That if self-control is a great predictor of all these life events,
get your kids in jujitsu.
Exactly. And so there's right down the street from here, one of the kids who's in our little league. His dad runs the jujitsu gym down here, and a bunch of kids go and do it. And I never did jujitsu, so it's like not a thing I would do intuitively. But I thought, oh man, that's an interesting place to go work out the discipline of self-control.
It's funny, a adult friend of mine who is a longtime CrossFit guy and stuff like that, like he started doing jiu-jitsu a couple years back, and he was like, yeah, you should do this and your boys should do it. And it was sort of like he meant like, it's not just like good, I like jiu-jitsu. It was like, there's like value here in a way that is like, translates into a lot of different stuff. So I'm interested in that. I'm going to go chase down that content. So show notes for all that stuff. Of course. Okay. Do we have anything else?
Covered that. No.
Yeah. No.
Do you have anything else?
Do you want to say a last thing about this? That's probably too big of a topic for this.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's everything.
I mean, we're what, 3 hours in here?
No, not 3. Right?
Which one we started
2,
at 8? Right?
No, we did not start at 8. We're not even 2 hours in. Okay. We got another hour. Let's go.
I mean,
no, we're not doing another hour. I got to go home.
No, yeah, I agree. This was good. We got awesome feedback on the last one. Yep. And it's exciting to.
I don't think I yelled at you enough this time.
We didn't really argue much. We got to find more contentious topics. Yeah. Andrew wants to have a conversation with me about my deconstructed religious experience. Maybe we would record it.
Dude, I mean, I would do that. That's completely up to you.
I'd have to work out where that would end up.
Yeah.
There is a podcast related to CTC's experience related to everything that we went through on the DEI side and how that topic relates to present day and things that have happened.
That episode,
there.
You mean?
I'm just saying, like
the series of podcasts. Is it one episode or is it a series? Because I listened to an episode with.
No, I'm saying that is a topic of conversation.
I would love. Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
Yeah. So it feels like maybe in the random show sometimes that whole experience I think is worth reflecting on. And we didn't talk the election. We could have covered. We could have. I'm just trying to think.
Really trying to alienate the DC community.
How could we spice it up in here?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think what I need to do is go make a Bamboo Earth ad that wins, and then you can tell me why it didn't work.
Please do that. That is you. There is an obligation on you after that. You're just staunch. I think you've actually backed off the long form explainer.
Not really. Yeah, we're still using them a lot. Yeah, I got a new client. It'll be the first thing we develop. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
We didn't talk about ugly ads. But
we did a little. We did a little.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, it's fine. I don't mind your point too much there. I think
you came up with a new phrase I heard on your podcast today: text in context.
Oh, it's just a stupid way that I just needed a label for an ad type. Yeah. And all I mean by that, text in context, is in the text of the photo is not overlaid on the image. Design. It's in the context of the image, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't. And they could be a post-it. Like a post-it is the most obvious example of that, but we do it with all kinds of things, letterboards and chalkboards and whatever else. So, yeah. All right, that's it. That's probably enough. We can argue next time.
All right,
great.
Everybody.
Give us feedback again. We're super appreciative of anybody who spent 2 hours listening and all that stuff. And we really do read and care about your feedback. So please send it to us. All right, thanks.
Take care.
All right, if you're still with us, thanks so much for hanging in for a really long episode. We did, as Taylor said at the end there, get really good feedback from the last one of these, and I do really want more feedback. Do that by emailing me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. You can check out everything I'm doing at ajfgrowth.com, including entering your email address there to sign up for my newsletter, which is extremely occasional right now, but I'm hoping to generate more of it. I said in the beginning of this, I'm hoping to increase my content output. That is part of what I am trying to do. So go check that out. Don't forget to subscribe to this wherever you're watching or listening. And what else? Follow me on Twitter at Andrew J. Ferris. I think that's pretty much it. Go follow all of Taylor's stuff, all of CTC's stuff. It's the best content about D2C on the internet, and you'll love it. But you already know that. You know Taylor. It's great. Go do all those things. I'll see you next time. I have so many good episodes coming up. I have interviews with Sarah Levenger, Alex Greenfield, hey, it's Alex P. Just awesome stuff. Really, really excited about what's coming down the pipe. Subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Taylor.
What?
We're at your office this time, not in my backyard.
I know.
I think it looks better.
It's funny though, like the amount of technology setup we did when there's like computers all around us to create this, like, and we're on this rickety
I know.
table.
I'm already nervous about how much you are going to bang into the table and make noise.
We're going to get this better each time. And this is definitely an improvement from your backyard, but only moderate.
Yeah, I think it's better. It's like, I don't know. We'll see how much the AC going on and off.
Gotta create some contrast too. We both wore gray shirts.
Yeah. I should probably keep the window open. Yeah. All right. What was I going to say to you?